The factory floor is silent now. 75 acres of brick and steel along Winchester Avenue, where 21,000 workers once streamed through the gates. The machines are gone, sold for scrap, shipped overseas, melted down. Weeds push through the parking lots where 3 shifts arrived around the clock. The air that once smelled of machine oil and walnut sawdust smells of nothing at all. This was Winchester, the company that made the gun that won the West, the arsenal that armed 2 world wars. For 80 years, the factory whistle marked the rhythm of life for an entire neighborhood. Families worked here for 3 generations. The rifles they finished by hand, stormed beaches, liberated concentration camps, changed history. How does a place like this fall silent? What happens when the heartbeat of a community simply stops? A winter morning, 1943, snow on the ground, the sky still dark over New Haven, Connecticut, and then the whistle blows. 21,000 workers stream toward the gates of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. They come from every direction, walking from row houses in New Hallville, stepping off trolleys on Dixwell Avenue, parking battered Fords in lots that stretch for blocks. Irish families who've worked here for 3 generations, Italian immigrants from the old neighborhood, Polish machinists, German toolmakers. And now, for the first time in significant numbers, Black men and women from Alabama, from Georgia, from the Carolinas, migrants who'd traveled north seeking something that didn't exist back home, work that paid a living wage regardless of the color of your hands. They pass through the main entrance on Winchester Avenue, a fortress of brick and steel that sprawls across 75 acres. 3 million square feet of factory floor, 48 buildings connected by corridors, catwalks and rail lines. A city unto itself, with its own hospital staff, its own fire department, its own security force of 50 guards. Inside, the machines never stop. The sound hits you first. A wall of noise, stamping presses, milling machines, the rhythmic clatter of metal being shaped into something deadly and precise. The floor vibrates beneath your feet, a low hum that travels up through your legs and settles in your chest. You feel this place before you understand it. The air smells of machine oil and hot metal, of brass shavings and cutting fluid. In the stock-making department, the sweet scent of walnut sawdust. In the break rooms, coffee and cigarette smoke. These smells become part of you. Workers who spent 30 years on that floor carried them home in their clothes. Their wives knew it. Their children knew it. It was the smell of steady work, of a paycheck that could build a life. Down the assembly lines, M1 Garand rifles take shape, receivers machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, barrels bored and rifled with precision that would have seemed impossible a generation earlier. Each rifle weighs 9.5 pounds, each one inspected, test-fired, proven before it ships. General George Patton would call the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. And right here, in this building, Winchester workers are making over 500,000 of them. In another section, the M1 carbines. Winchester engineers had designed this weapon in just 13 days, a crash program that seemed impossible until they did it. Light enough for paratroopers, reliable enough for jungle warfare. 6 million would be produced before the war ended, more than any other American small arm in history. This was Winchester at its peak, the arsenal of democracy, the largest employer in New Haven, the heartbeat of an entire community. 21,000 workers, 3 shifts, around the clock, 7 days a week. The world depended on what came out of these gates. Working for the company is working for the country, the Winchester record proclaimed, and everyone believed it. The men on the floor knew that what they built today might save a soldier's life tomorrow. The rifles they finished by hand would storm beaches, liberate concentration camps, turn the tide of history. There was pride in that, purpose, meaning. They couldn't know, none of them could, that this was the highest point, the summit before the long descent. The war would end, the contracts would dry up, and the silence, when it finally came, would be deafening. To understand what was lost here, you have to understand what was built. And that story begins 80 years earlier, with a shirt manufacturer from Boston who saw something no one else could see. Oliver Fisher Winchester was born on November 30th, 1810, on the outskirts of Boston. Hardscrabble farm country. His family were what people called penniless farmers, which meant exactly what it sounded like. He had almost no formal education. What he had instead was a talent for recognizing opportunity and the nerve to seize it. As a teenager, Winchester apprenticed as a carpenter. By the time he turned 21, he was already a master of the trade, but he wasn't interested in building houses for other people. He was interested in building something of his own. He tried his hand at men's furnishings in Baltimore. Then, in 1848, he moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and started manufacturing dress shirts. It wasn't glamorous work, but Winchester had a gift for it. He patented a new type of collar. He systematized production. He built a factory that hummed with efficiency. Within a few years, he was wealthy enough to start looking for his next opportunity. He found it in 18 1855. Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson, yes, that Smith and Wesson had acquired patents for something called the volition repeating rifle, a lever-action firearm that could fire multiple shots without reloading. Revolutionary technology in theory. In practice, the thing barely worked. The cartridges were unreliable. The mechanism jammed. Smith and Wesson incorporated the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company to manufacture these weapons, and they were looking for investors. Most men would have seen a money pit. Winchester saw potential. He became the largest stockholder, and when the volcanic rifle failed, when the company went bankrupt by 1856, exactly as everyone except Winchester had predicted, he didn't walk away. He bought the wreckage. In April 1857, Winchester and his partner John M. Davies purchased the bankrupt firm's assets and reorganized it as the New Haven Arms Company. The equipment, the patents, and most importantly, the people, including a brilliant shop foreman named Benjamin Tyler Henry. Henry was a mechanical genius. He'd been tinkering with the volcanic design for years, trying to solve the problems that had doomed it. While Winchester handled the business side, Henry worked in the shop, perfecting the self-contained metallic rimfire cartridge, the .44 Henry round, reliable, powerful, and when combined with a new rifle design he'd been developing capable of firing 16 shots without reloading. 16 shots. In an era when most soldiers carried single-shot muskets, this was almost unimaginable. The Henry repeating rifle received its patent in 1860, just as the nation was tearing itself apart. And while the U.S. Army's bureaucracy was too slow to adopt it officially, Union soldiers who got their hands on Henry rifles, often purchasing them with their own money, gained an enormous tactical advantage. Confederate soldiers had a name for it. That damned Yankee rifle you can load on Sunday and shoot all week. Over 12,000 Henry rifles were produced during the Civil War. The New Haven Arms Company prospered. Oliver Winchester was becoming a very wealthy man, but Benjamin Henry was not. The genius who'd made the rifle work felt he wasn't being adequately compensated. In 1866, Henry made his move. He petitioned the Connecticut legislature to award him ownership of the company. Winchester was in Europe when he heard the news. He rushed back across the Atlantic and outmaneuvered Henry politically, using every connection he'd built over 2 decades in New Haven civic life. He'd been a city commissioner. He would become lieutenant governor of Connecticut. He knew how power worked in this state. Henry lost. He left the company shortly after, bitter and empty-handed, and Oliver Winchester reorganized his company one final time. The New Haven Arms Company became the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Henry's name would fade from history. Winchester's would echo through the ages. There's something uncomfortable in this story. The man whose genius made the rifle work walked away with nothing. The businessman who recognized that genius, who had the capital and the connections to exploit it, got his name on every rifle that followed. That's not villainy. It's just how empires get built. The first rifle to bear the Winchester name was the Model 1866. Workers called it the Yellow Boy for its brass receiver, a gleaming golden-colored frame that caught the light like nothing else on the market. The Yellow Boy improved on Henry's design in crucial ways. A loading gate on the side of the receiver, designed by Winchester employee Nelson King, made reloading faster and safer. A wooden forend protected the shooter's hand from the heat of the barrel. The rifle was rugged, reliable, and capable of firing 13 shots without reloading. Frontiersmen embraced it immediately, settlers pushing west, hunters who needed a weapon that wouldn't fail in the wilderness. The Winchester rifle became part of the mythology of American expansion, even if, in truth, most of them were sold to deer hunters east of the Mississippi. But Oliver Winchester understood something that his competitors didn't. The Civil War was over. The U.S. Army wasn't buying repeating rifles in large numbers. If his company was going to survive, he needed to find customers elsewhere. So he deployed sales agents across the world: South America, Europe, Asia, anywhere governments were fighting wars or settlers were pushing into new territory. Winchester rifles followed. He secured contracts, negotiated protective legislation, built a global distribution network that his competitors couldn't match. When other American gun makers failed in the lean years after the Civil War, Winchester survived. More than survived, he thrived. In 1873, the company introduced the Model 1873, chambered for the new .44-40 Winchester center fire cartridge. It was an immediate sensation. Reliable, accurate, powerful enough for deer, light enough to carry all day. Over 720,000 would be produced by 1923. The gun that won the West, the advertisements would later call it. Cowboys and lawmen, Texas Rangers, and frontier sheriffs. The Model 1873 became a symbol, not just of Winchester, but of America itself. Oliver Winchester didn't live to see his company's greatest triumphs. He died on December 10, 1880, at the age of 70. His ownership passed to his son, William Wirt Winchester, who died of tuberculosis just 4 months later. But the company Winchester had built was strong enough to survive without him, and in 1883, it got even stronger. A Winchester sales representative traveling through Utah came across a remarkable rifle, a single-shot design of unusual elegance and power. He bought it and shipped it back to New Haven, where it landed on the desk of Thomas G. Bennett, the company's general manager, and Oliver Winchester's son-in-law. Bennett recognized genius when he saw it. He paid $8,000 for the patent rights and invited the designer to work with Winchester on future projects. The designer's name was John Moses Browning. He was a Mormon gunsmith from Ogden, Utah, the son of a frontier gunmaker who'd learned his trade building weapons for settlers and hunters. Browning had a gift that bordered on the supernatural. He could see how a mechanism should work, how the forces of physics could be harnessed to cycle an action, chamber a round, fire a shot. Over the next 2 decades, he would transform Winchester's product line. The partnership began with the Model 1885 single-shot rifle. Then came the Model 1886, a lever action that could handle massive cartridges like the .45-70 Government and the .50-110 Express, the rifle that conquered big game. Then the Model 1892, a scaled-down version of the 1886, light and handy, chambered for pistol cartridges. Cowboys loved it, ranchers loved it. It would become the lever-action rifle of Hollywood westerns, appearing in countless films, even when the period being depicted predated the rifle's invention. Then came the rifle that would define Winchester for the next century. The Model 1894 was the first lever-action designed from the ground up for smokeless powder. Chambered in .30-30 Winchester, it offered flat trajectory and stopping power that black powder rifles couldn't match. Hunters across America embraced it. Over 5 million would be produced, more than any other sporting rifle in history. John Moses Browning designed the action. Winchester manufactured it. Between 1883 and 1900, Winchester purchased over 44 different Browning designs. Some went into production, others were bought simply to keep them away from competitors. Browning's genius, combined with Winchester's manufacturing prowess, created dominance. By the turn of the century, the factory had expanded to fill several city blocks in the New Hallville neighborhood of New Haven. Employment had grown from a few dozen workers in the 1850s to over 600 by 1887, then past 1,000 by 1900. Buildings designed by Leone W. Robinson, one of New Haven's premier architects, rose along Winchester Avenue, brick and steel monuments to the company's ambition. And around the factory, a community took shape. The Irish came first. They'd been in New Haven since the 1840s, building the Farmington Canal, laying railroad tracks, doing the hard work that built Connecticut's industrial backbone. When Winchester established its permanent factory on Winchester Avenue in 1870, Irish families settled in the surrounding blocks. They walked to work. They raised children who would follow them through those same gates. The Italians came next, drawn by steady work and the promise of a life better than the one they'd left behind. Then Polish families, Germans, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. The neighborhood of New Hallville grew up around the factory like a plant growing towards sunlight. Housing sprang up on Admiral Street, Henry Street, Gregory Street, worker housing built specifically for Winchester employees. 2 family homes and 3 family tenements, close enough to hear the factory whistle marking the shift changes. Grocery stores opened to serve the growing population. Butcher shops, bakeries, churches where families worshipped in a half-dozen languages. On Ashman Street, Peter and Rose McDermott, immigrants from County Leitrim, Ireland, opened a tavern in 1911. McDermott's became legendary among Winchester workers, a place to gather after the shift, to cash paychecks, to celebrate marriages and mourn deaths. The McDermotts ran it for 40 years, until 1951. 3 generations of Winchester workers passed through those doors. This was the rhythm of life in a factory town. The company didn't just employ people, it shaped everything around it, the commercial ecosystem, the social fabric, the very identity of the place. When you lived in New Hallville, Winchester wasn't just where you worked, it was why your neighborhood existed. A young man could graduate from school, or not graduate, and walk onto the factory floor. He could learn a trade, develop skill, take pride in his work. The wages were good. By 1900, Winchester was netting an inflation-adjusted $32 million in a single year. Some of that found its way into workers' pockets. A machinist could buy a house, raise a family, send his children to schools paid for by taxes that Winchester contributed. He could retire after 40 years with a pension, his body worn, but his pride intact, and his son might take his place on the floor. That was the promise. That was what Winchester meant to the people who built their lives around it. Then came 1914. The guns of August shattered Europe. The Great War, the war that would kill 17 million people before it ended, created an insatiable demand for weapons, and Winchester was ready to supply them. Even before America entered the conflict, Orders flooded in from Britain, France, Belgium. By 1914, Winchester had about 5,000 employees. By 1915, orders from Allied governments had reached $50 million. By 1917, the workforce had tripled to 17,500. The factory expanded at a pace that seemed almost impossible. New buildings rose along Winchester Avenue. The brass mill added capacity. Machine shops multiplied. At the height of the war effort, the complex covered 3 million square feet, 75 acres of brick and steel, the largest firearms manufacturing facility in America. Pattern 1914, Enfield rifles for the British Army, nearly 250,000. Model 1895, lever actions for Tsar Nicholas II's Russia, almost 300,000. After America joined the fight in April 1917, Winchester produced the Model 1917 Enfield, the rifle that more American doughboys carried into combat than any other. They made Model 1897 shotguns, modified for trench warfare and nicknamed trench brooms for their devastating effectiveness in close quarters. Working with the legendary John Browning, Winchester engineers developed the Browning automatic rifle, the BAR, and produced over 27,000 of them. They helped design the .50 caliber machine gun round, a cartridge so successful that it remains in military service today. And the ammunition. Nearly 900 million rounds for the US military alone. This plant has contributed a large part of the 2.5 billion of cartridges accepted by the government, boasted the Winchester record in August 1918. It wasn't an exaggeration. The workforce swelled. Women entered the factory in significant numbers for the first time. Women will now rapidly enter gainful occupations, formerly occupied by men, a Winchester sales manager predicted in 1916. By the end of the war, women were making Browning machine guns alongside men, operating polishing equipment and inspection stations throughout the plant. The factory became its own world. 3 shifts around the clock, a hospital with 17 medical staff members, 50 security guards, a fire department, social clubs and drama societies, baseball teams and musical groups. The Winchester Band marched in parades. Workers walked to their stations past posters, reminding them that their labor was patriotic duty. The Winchester record covers showed soldiers with Winchester weapons storming enemy positions. What you made today might win the war tomorrow. And then, on November 11, 1918, the war ended. The guns fell silent in Europe. And in New Haven, the contracts began to dry up. But first, the peak. Let me take you inside the Winchester factory at the moment of its greatest power. Not the frantic wartime production of 1917, but the steadier rhythm of the years that followed. The 1920s, when civilian demand was strong. The late 1930s, when new military contracts began flowing again. And above all, the early 1940s, when Winchester became what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. Start at the gates. Winchester Avenue, early morning. The trolley stops are crowded with workers. The parking lots are filling up. Rows of black Fords and Chevrolets, modest cars for modest men who are earning decent money for the first time in their lives. The factory whistle blows. The morning shift begins. Inside, the scale of the operation is staggering. You could walk for an hour and not see every department. The brass mill, where metal was rolled into sheets for cartridge cases. The machine shops, where rifle parts were cut and milled and drilled to specifications measured in thousandths of an inch. The assembly lines, where components came together into finished weapons. The test ranges, where every rifle was fired and inspected before it shipped. Raw materials arrived by rail, steel from Pennsylvania, brass from Connecticut's own Naugatuck Valley, walnut from forests across America. The wood was seasoned, shaped, and fitted into stocks that felt like they'd grown into your hands. Nothing was rushed, nothing was cheap. Listen, the baseline hum of machinery that never stopped, the rhythmic clatter of stamping presses, pneumatic hisses from assembly stations, the clang of metal on metal, voices calling across the floor, laughter from the break rooms, the sharp crack of test firing from the rifle range. Workers grew so accustomed to this noise that silence felt wrong. When they went home at night, the quiet of their houses seemed strange. Some couldn't sleep without the background rhythm of production. Smell, machine oil, the pervasive scent of a working factory, hot metal from the forging operations, the sharp bite of cutting fluid, brass shavings with their distinctive metallic tang. In the stock-making department, the sweet smell of walnut sawdust. In the break rooms, coffee percolating and cigarette smoke drifting toward the high ceilings. Feel the vibration of the floor beneath your feet. Stand in the right spot and you could sense the whole building humming, a living organism, breathing, producing. The temperature varied wildly, blast furnace heat near the forging operations, cooler air in the assembly areas, bitter cold by the loading docks in winter, and the product itself. Pick up a finished Winchester rifle. Feel the weight of it. 9 pounds of steel and walnut, precision machined and hand-fitted. Work the lever action. Feel that satisfying click as the mechanism cycles. This is what pride feels like when you can hold it in your hands. They were machinists and assemblers, tool and die makers and inspectors. They came from neighborhoods within walking distance: New Hallville, Dixwell, the blocks surrounding the factory that existed because the factory existed. A typical worker arrived for the morning shift around 7. He'd punch his time card at the entrance, nod to the men he'd worked alongside for years, head to his station. The work was skilled. Winchester rifles required considerable hand finishing, operations that machines couldn't replicate. A man who could fit a stock perfectly to a receiver, who could hand finish a trigger mechanism to operate with glass-smooth precision, was worth his wages. The daily rhythm shaped everything. Lunch breaks in the cafeteria or at your station, eating from a lunch pail your wife had packed that morning, coffee from the break room, cigarette breaks when the foreman wasn't watching too closely, conversations about baseball, about politics, about whose daughter was getting married and whose son had enlisted. Multi-generational employment was common. Fathers and sons worked the same floors. Grandfathers showed grandsons how to run the machines they'd run for 40 years. The Sims family worked at Winchester for generations. Raymond Sims was an electrician. His mother worked in the battery shop. His brother worked in gun assembly. The Looney family, the Foster family, dozens of others whose names appeared on employment rolls decade after decade. Lawrence Young was hired in 1943. He became one of the first African Americans in the woodworking department, a breakthrough that happened because the war demanded more workers than prejudice could afford to exclude. Young stayed for 43 years. He worked on the most expensive stocks at Winchester and finished guns for President Roosevelt, President de Gaulle, and mostly all the presidents and prime ministers that came to Washington. That was the pride of craft. Not just making things, but making things that mattered, things that would last, things that would be used by presidents and soldiers and hunters who depended on their reliability. Winchester was like a huge family, Craig Gauthier would remember. He worked there from 1973 to 1996, long after the golden age had faded. But the men who'd lived through the peak years told him stories, the camaraderie, the sense that you were part of something bigger than yourself. The machine that kept the community thriving, that's what Gauthier called it. The wages were good. By the time unions organized the plant, Local 609 of the International Association of Machinists won recognition in 1955. Workers had already achieved a standard of living that would have seemed impossible to their immigrant grandparents. They owned homes in New Hallville, their children attended good schools, they retired with pensions. This was what American manufacturing promised, a path to the middle class that didn't require a college degree. Show up, work hard, learn your trade, take pride in what you make, and the company will take care of you. That was the promise. For a while, Winchester kept it. Stand at the corner of Winchester Avenue and Munson Street, 1943. The morning shift is streaming through the gates. 21,000 workers in 3 shifts around the clock, 7 days a week. Behind you, the New Hallville neighborhood spreads outward. 2 family homes and 3-deckers, brick and clapboard houses where Winchester families have lived for generations. The streets are full of children walking to school. Women hang laundry in backyards. The corner grocery is opening for the day. This neighborhood exists because the factory exists. When Winchester established its permanent plant here in 1870, New Hallville was farmland at the edge of New Haven. The factory created the demand for housing. Developers built homes for workers. Shops opened to serve them. Churches rose, Catholic and Protestant, serving Irish and Italian and Polish congregations. By the 1940s, New Hallville had the highest rate of African American home ownership in New Haven. The Great Migration had brought black families north, seeking work and dignity. Winchester, desperate for labor during the war, hired them. For many, it was the first time they'd earned wages that could build wealth. The neighborhood thrived on factory time. The morning whistle at 7, the shift change at 3, the evening shift arriving as the day shift left. Taverns filled up after work. The grocery stores stayed open late to catch workers heading home. McDermott's Tavern on Ashman Street, the diners on Dixwell Avenue, the barbershops and beauty parlors, the churches packed on Sunday mornings. All of it, every storefront, every congregation, every gathering place, sustained by the wages that Winchester paid. Walk through New Hallville today, and you'll find the same streets, the same houses, some of them anyway. But the factory that gave this neighborhood its reason for being is silent now. The shops that served the workers are gone. The taverns where 3 generations gathered have closed. That silence is part of this story too, but not yet. Not in 1943. In 1943, the factory hummed, the neighborhood thrived, and Winchester was about to reach the highest point in its long history, World War II. If World War I had expanded Winchester to unprecedented size, World War II pushed it to the absolute limit of what industrial production could achieve. Peak employment, 21,000 workers. Some sources say 19,000. The exact number varies, but the scale doesn't. This was the largest workforce in Winchester's history, and it would never be matched again. The factory operated around the clock. 3 shifts, 7 days a week, every machine running, every workstation staffed. The complex that had seemed enormous in 1918 was now pressed to capacity. M1 Garand rifles, 513,880 delivered to the US military between 1940 and 1945. Winchester was the only private company entrusted with Garand production during the entire war. Springfield Armory made the rest, the government's own facility. But when the military needed a private manufacturer, they turned to Winchester. M1 carbines, over 830,000. The weapon Winchester engineers had designed in those frantic 13 days before the submission deadline. Light, reliable, effective. Paratroopers carried them into Normandy. Marines carried them across Pacific Islands. General George S. Patton called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. In 1944, Winchester built a special presentation-grade Garand for Patton personally. The war broke barriers that peacetime never could. Management, desperate for workers, overrode the objections of white employees and hired African Americans in unprecedented numbers. Black workers who'd faced closed doors everywhere else found opportunity at Winchester. Not equality. Racial prejudice didn't disappear, but work, steady work, wages that could buy homes and build lives. The Winchester Record, the company magazine, published covers showing American soldiers with Winchester weapons. Workers saw their products in newsreels, read about them in newspapers. The rifle you finish today might storm a beach tomorrow, might liberate a concentration camp, might save a soldier's life. Pride, purpose. The sense that what you did mattered. Working for the company is working for the country. Everyone believed it. In 1943, 1944, 1945, standing on that factory floor, listening to the roar of production, feeling the vibration of American industry at full power, how could you not believe it? This was Winchester at its zenith, the arsenal of democracy, the factory that armed the nation. These floors would one day fall silent. The machines that seemed like they'd run forever would stop. But in 1943, nobody standing in this building could imagine such a thing. The numbers tell the story. Peak employment, 21,000 workers. Peak production, over 500,000 M1 Garands, over 800,000 M1 carbines, countless millions of rounds of ammunition. Peak impact, the weapons that won the war. Winchester's reputation had never been higher. The company that made the gun that won the West had now made the guns that won the world. The lever actions that armed the frontier, the automatic rifles that stopped the Kaiser, the Garands and carbines that defeated the Axis, all of it bore the Winchester name. Inside the factory, confidence was absolute. The workforce had proven itself capable of miracles. The facilities were modern, expanded and upgraded throughout the war years. The Winchester brand was synonymous with quality, reliability, American craftsmanship. Outside, the future seemed limitless. The war would end, everyone knew that. But peacetime would bring demand of a different kind. All those soldiers would come home. They'd want hunting rifle, sporting shotguns, the Winchesters they'd dreamed about in foxholes and on transport ships. The civilian market would explode. That was the thinking. That was the assumption. That was what the spreadsheets projected and the executives believed. But here's what nobody talked about, not out loud, not in 1944. The factory had borrowed heavily to finance this expansion. Billions of dollars in government contracts were flowing through the gates. But when those contracts ended, what would replace them? The massive infrastructure that could produce 500,000 rifles for the military in 4 years. How would it stay busy making sporting rifles that customers bought one at a time? The workforce of 21,000, what happens to them when the war ends? These questions hung in the air, unspoken. And on VE Day, May 8, 1945, the factory celebrated the end of the war in Europe. And on VJ Day, August 15, 1945, they celebrated again the final victory, the end of the bloodiest conflict in human history. But this time, the celebration was nervous, because everyone understood what victory meant. The contracts would dry up, the workforce would shrink, the future that had seemed so certain was suddenly terrifying. 1945 was the peak, the absolute summit. And standing at that height, looking out at an empire that had armed a nation and helped save the world, nobody inside those walls could see clearly what was coming next. The decisions that would hollow out this company were already being made. The forces that would shutter this factory were already in motion. But in 1945, they were still invisible, hidden behind the pride of victory, the confidence of success, the reasonable assumptions that had always proven true before. Winchester had survived the Depression, survived 2 world wars, built the guns that won the West and saved democracy. How could anything threaten a company like that?